In a game with the depth and breadth of tactical decision-making that Fire Emblem Engage provides, the decisions you need to make can be overwhelming. Given the challenge present here as well, this spoiling for choice could come as a detriment. So today, we're going to cover some foundational points that you can add to your core strategy, making a base for you to build from. Let's begin. Hello everyone, my name is Tom, otherwise known as Titanium Legman. If you like what I do, please subscribe. I'm a small creator looking to make YouTube my full-time career, and we're hoping to hit 15k subs by the end of the year. So, if you'd like to help, I'd very much appreciate it. Thank you. Two quick notes before we begin today. First, I have to warn about spoilers. In point 4 of this video, I'll be discussing two boss battles, one from Chapter 14 and one from IKE'S Paralogue, as part of my discussion of tactical retreats. If you don't want to be spoiled for those battles, skip this point. I'll have another spoiler warning before I start discussing it. People who skip around in videos willy-nilly, you have been warned. You can see where that point will begin and end in the timeline below. Also, this was originally a 10-point video, but it got a bit chunky, so I've split it into 2 videos instead. Look for part 2 coming after this video. Now, with that out of the way, on to the info. Number 1, make life simple with Sigurd Louis. To smooth out your combat experience and make focusing on your levels all the easier, consider relieving Alfred of his ring and grant Sigurd to Omega Chad Louis instead. As an armor knight, Louis is immune to being broken due to the weapon triangle, and he's incredibly tough to take down. Combined with the massive move range and maneuverability that Sigurd provides, Louis becomes a storm of destruction who can swoop into a group of enemies and plant himself in their midst, immovable and unbreakable. Throw a forged javelin on him and laugh as he single-handedly weakens, if not outright wipes out, an entire side of the map. Just watch out for mages, who are one of the only things that can bring Louis down. The nice thing is, though, with a powerful thrown weapon like that javelin and Sigurd's momentum skill, Louis will more often than not have the raw damage output to detonate an enemy mage with one throw. And with his high HP, it's quite possible for him to survive combat with one more if there happens to be 2 in the squad that you're working on. Finally, gathering a large group of enemies in an area is great for Sigurd's override skill, allowing Louis to GTFO if he's in danger, or just finish off the stragglers after his javelin apocalypse. Sigurd Louis, coming to a vulnerable enemy pack near you. Number 2, how to train Jean, or anyone, really. Speaking of softening up the enemy, let's take a moment to talk about everyone's favorite doctor in training, Jean. This plucky lad is the resident Donald of Engage. Following after the cooking pot-clad villager from Fire Emblem Awakening, Jean comes with the expertise skill that increases his stat growths when leveling up. This means that, with time, he can become one of your hardest-hitting badasses, but as a level 1 healer, Jean's combat ability isn't exactly great to start off with. Fortunately, there's some stuff we can do to help with that. Also note that this is a bit of a longer section, but it's very useful knowledge. If you feel like you're already in the know, feel free to skip to the next chapter in the timeline if this one runs a little long for you. First off, let's start at the blacksmith. Forging low-level weapons comes at a relatively cheap cost, with a, for example, +3 iron body art costing 100 iron, 5 steel, and 1100 gold, all of which are resources you will build up quite quickly. This will give Jean +4 to his damage and +5 to his hit. Add on an engrave from Sigurd to add another +1 damage, reduce the weight of the weapon by 1, and add 20 of void, and suddenly Jean is looking quite a bit scarier and quite a bit more resilient on the front lines. Next, let's head to the arena. As I mentioned in my previous tips video, whatever weapon you have equipped on a character when you enter them into the arena is the weapon that they will use in the coming battle. So, that fancy schmancy iron body art we just made will serve as a great tool here. Given the fact that it has the double attack property, and the fact that you always attack first in the arena, Jean will be able to get a big opening hit in on most opponents. If you're lucky, you'll be facing a squishy mage like Clan or Celine, who Jean could potentially even one-round KO. But if you're not lucky, you might get an ace armored unit like Louis, who will wipe the floor with the lad. Either way, you'll get XP, obviously more if you win. Do this after every battle, and you'll start getting stronger in no time. Next, let's head to the battlefield, where there's 3 things that you can do for Jean. As I talked about with Sigurd, utilizing a slow, tanky unit to soften up enemies allows low damage units like Jean to get easy kills for relatively low risk. Next, Jean is a staff unit, meaning you can engage in the classic Fire Emblem strat of healing 1 HP on any unit you can, anytime you can. Healing staves are relatively cheap in this game as well, so slap a couple on Jean, and if he has nothing better to do in a fight, have him heal. 1 HP might not make the difference in a fight, and as such be important to heal, quote unquote, but at the end of the day, XP is king, so get it while it's good. Finally, speaking of healing, let's talk about Emblem Micaiah. Emblem Micaiah is a good pick for Jean in general due to the boosts that she gives saves, so she synergizes well with what you're probably already doing with him. However, her great sacrifice ability is the true moneymaker here. When used, it will provide nearly a full level of experience to the unit using it. While you can only use this ability once per engage, if you focus on getting engage back, you can get 2 or 3 procs per battle, and as such, 2 to 3 levels just off of this skill alone, let alone any other experience you're getting. I'm sure you can see how the levels will start rolling in if you start to do this. And the best part is, other than the chip healing that stave units do, all of this information is applicable to anyone you want to level. With a little bit of prep work for a weapon and some light babysitting, pretty much any unit you want to use can be brought up to snuff. Unless they've been stats screwed, of course, but that's a bit harder to fix. Moving on to number 3, Rewarp Bomb, Micaiah and you. And since we're on the topic of Micaiah, I want to address another wild strat you can make use of, the Rewarp Bomb. Once you gain access to the Micaiah Emblem Ring, your staves will get a big boost thanks to her skills, which increase both the range and, importantly, the area of effect that they have. On the surface, you would be forgiven for seeing this simply as more convenient and efficient healing, AoE healing, or even allowing for more aggressive debuffing of the enemy. But consider the Rewarp Staff. This staff is accessible in the shop early in the game, and allows the wielder to teleport themselves a short distance across the battlefield. Typically, this is used for quickly escaping approaching enemies, or jumping to another front of the battle where healing is needed, and it's not the most exciting staff in the world. But remember what Micaiah does. Increases staff range and area of effect. Have your staff wielder engage with Micaiah with the Rewarp Staff in your inventory. Suddenly, you'll notice they aren't just targeting themselves with it. They're also targeting the 4 adjacent spaces as well. Now, you have an aerial drop pod that you can summon on command, with the power to drop your strongest party members onto high-value targets, important strategic locations, and of course, bosses. Nothing quite says power like zapping an enemy of emblem bearers past the boss's carefully planned defenses to wreak havoc in the backline. Annoying enemy staff users? Not anymore. Thieves going to steal your treasure? Paste them! Truly, it's kind of intoxicating. Of course, you can use this staff as a fast retreat option as well, as there are definitely some maps in Engage where tactical retreats are important to not get overwhelmed by the enemy. Also, this strategy will work with the Rewarp Staff and the traditional Warp Staff once you have access to both it and Micaiah. Really, keep an eye on this one. Warp skipping is a Fire Emblem tradition, and while it isn't really my cup of tea, I'm sure there will be a lot of people breaking a lot of stuff with the Rewarp Bomb before too long. Moving on to number 4, we mentioned tactical retreats before, so don't be afraid of tactical retreats. Really, this strategy deserves its own mention for how important it can be in Engage. For the new players out there, you might be asking, what is a tactical retreat? Well, sometimes it is known as a fighting retreat, and essentially this is when you fall back through territory you've already cleared with some or all of your force, while still fighting and defeating enemies as you do so. The idea is that, in a situation where the enemy force would be too overwhelming to handle all at once, due to maybe like a big boss enemy or just sheer numbers, you can slowly whittle down their frontrunners while keeping out of reach of the overall threat. This is especially important in maps where you might not have that much space to retreat through, meaning that you need to fight where you can to make sure you don't just die tired when you are done running away and have nowhere else to go. Let's look at some examples, and again, big spoiler warning here. I'm talking here about boss encounters from Chapter 14 and from IKE'S Paralogue, as I mentioned at the start of the video. If you do not want to be spoiled for these chapters, especially the climactic boss encounters, skip ahead to the next chapter in the video now. You can see it on the timeline. You can see the timestamps in the description. Spoilers in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, if you're still here, let's talk about the battle with the Hounds and Hortensia in the Palace of Solm in Chapter 14. In this battle, you're facing 3 of the 4 Hounds, Mavier, Marnie, and Zephyia, as well as Hortensia. In the boss room, there are enemy units, including a couple of healers, and this battle is notable for Zephyia having a revival crystal and Hortensia having 2, as well as the Byleth emblem ring that allows her to dance a group of enemies and give them another turn. There's a lot of health here, and a lot of actions that can be taken against you, and you've got a lot of work to chew through. Additionally, once aggroed, it's very possible that this group will rush you, putting you on the back foot. This is exactly what happened to me, and my chat was theorizing that it's because I decided to snipe one of the healers with Lynn's emblem attack, and that maybe kind of triggered them early, but either way, they will rush you if you attack them and give them some time. I was forced to pull back out of their range, including Zephyria's enormous Thoron casts, long enough to get a front line established and deal with the enemy reinforcements in Wyvern Riders and Pegasi that also spawned behind me after the bosses charged. With the distance I gained, I was able to weaken the enemy using Ike and Louis with Great Aether, then push forward again to start finishing them off. If I had stood and fought, I probably could have won, but I would have lost units. And that's not how we do things here. Similarly, let's touch on Ike's Paralogue. In this battle, Ike waits patiently for a whole lot less than 25 turns before deciding it's time to attack. You'd think you have time to finish dealing with his very tanky units before he gets to you. You'll stop thinking that when Ike goes full Kool-Aid Man, busts through the damn fort between you and him, and tries to steal your girl. Unless you're prepared for this to happen and set up to do so ahead of time, you cannot beat him as he does this. You must fall back and stall Ike while working on clearing his units, setting up new choke points as you go. You'll be flirting with danger the whole time. There's going to be a lot of enemy reinforcements, and again, a lot of health to chew through with a lot of armor units. But at least you won't have the entirety of Tellius dogpiling you before Ike jumps in on top to finish the job. Don't be afraid to retreat. You will need to at different points in the game. Don't be afraid of it. It's fine. Number 5, promote early and often. This one is a bit of a change from past Fire Emblem titles, and it's one that a lot of people have been either asking about or talking about, so I felt it was important to highlight here. And yes, it's not directly to do with combat, but it's going to have a big impact on your combat ability, so bear with me. Make sure that you're promoting your units as soon as they hit level 10. It used to be that there was a hard cap on how many levels you could get in Fire Emblem, typically a max of 40, 20 in your base class and 20 in your promoted class. So you wanted to wait until you got to level 20 in your base class in most scenarios to make sure that you would have the maximum amount of XP and levels that you could by the time you maxed out your advanced class by the end of the game. However, over time, Intelligent Systems has been changing that formula up a bit, and now in Engage, you can use second seals to reset your level as many times as you want. Now, you functionally have infinite levels to gain stats with, meaning there's no long-term harm in promoting when you can for the stat boosts, increased movement, weapon proficiencies, and skills. Now, I hear some of you old heads in the back saying that you lose XP gains once you're promoted, but that no longer appears to be the case either. Instead, you have a class level and an internal level on every unit. The class level determines when you can promote and learn skills, and will fluctuate up and down as you use various seals. Your internal level is the total of all levels you've gained and is what determines your XP gains. And unfortunately, as far as I know, it can't be viewed in-game. It's something you kind of have to keep track of for yourself. That's why Vander, in particular, gains so little XP in the early game. His internal level, I think from the data mines, is set at like 15. So he has very little opportunity for growth in the time that he's actually viable to use before you wind up benching him. It's also worth noting that most promoted classes in Engage seem to have slightly better growth rates than their unpromoted counterparts. Take, for example, the transition from Lance Fighter to Halberdier. Upon promotion to Halberdier, your favorite Lance unit will gain plus 5% to their strength, speed, and defense growths, probably the most important growths for this line of class. And that might not seem like a lot, but over endless levels, it can definitely add up, and on higher difficulties, you want every bit of stats you can get. So don't wait. Promote today. And that's where I'm going to call this one, guys. Like I said at the start of the video, this one was meant to have 5 more points, but that script would have looked like a graduate thesis, so I'm splitting it in 2. Next up will be part 2, then we'll be moving on to other topics. Let me know what you think about this info. Feel free to add any extra info or corrections in the comments, and drop your own tips that I may include in future videos as well. Again, my name is Tom, otherwise known as Titanium Legman. I hope you all have a good night. Stay safe and healthy out there, and remember, be good to each other. Bye now.